Sean Hook's Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us. Things are heating up in Washington between a $1 trillion infrastructure package and a $3.5 trillion budget plan. They're spending money in Washington like they've got a printing press. Well, of course they do. It's your money. The question is, you and your children, maybe your grandchildren, will get stuck with a bill. The question is it worth it? Fox News Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram joins us live from Capitol Hill. Chad, great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Chad, let's start with the infrastructure bill. There's some bipartisan agreement on it, and Chuck Schumer is talking about votes on this next week in the Senate. But Republicans are pushing back, saying, well, let's vote when we've got it ready. It sounds like they're kind of putting the cart before the horse.
That never happens in Washington, does it? Well, to be clear to the viewers here, this bipartisan infrastructure package, which is about $1.2 trillion total. It's really in the $600 to $700 billion range in terms of new money. The rest is going to be reprogrammed. And what they have to do is this bill is subject to a filibuster. That means you need 60 votes to turn off a filibuster and then eventually maybe pass the bill. Well, if you have, significant Republican buy-in, okay, you can do that. But if you have a test vote, this procedural vote to actually launch debate on this particular bill, then that bill goes by the wayside. This has been the criticism by Democrats, saying, look, Republicans are not really willing to play ball. They've also made the case this is why they need to eliminate the filibuster and just do things with a simple majority vote. The Senate right now is 50-50. So if they can get that bipartisan buy-in and get at least 10 Republican senators and all 50 Democrats stick together, and that's unclear too, maybe you need more Republican senators, then they could probably pass the bipartisan bill. But here's the problem, and this is where a lot of folks believe that Democrats potentially laid a trap for Republicans. The idea is that if that bill blows up, and even though there's some Republicans who vote for it, but they don't get to 60 votes, Democrats can say, oh, I told you so, and use that, this inertia that they're trying to get going here to eliminate the filibuster, use that as another case study, and furthermore say Republicans are not interested in bipartisanship. That's why we're going to go alone and do our own $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill.
Yeah, Chad, it appears to me, just watching it, that there is some bipartisan support for infrastructure. When you get into the $3.5 trillion of all this other stuff, that's where Republicans are saying, given the state of the economy, rising inflation, all of this stuff, and the fact that the economy has been recovering, why do we need all this money? We're throwing money around like we're crazy, and that's where they seem to be saying time out.
Yeah, there was a lot of question the past few days about inflationary concerns. Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, he testified before House and Senate committees the past few days, was asked a lot about that issue. Some people think that maybe inflation is going to stick around a lot longer, even than what Powell had been suggesting. There's real concerns about that. And is that fueled by this, adding extra spending in, $3.5 trillion, adding, close to several $100 billion, if not $1 trillion on the bipartisan bill, to say nothing of the $1.9 trillion bill the Democrats passed on their own back in March. So what happens, whether or not this can be pinned on the Democrats or not, Republicans are going to try to do so. This is really a political football. They will weaponize this, and as prices continue to spike, they will say, aha, we told you so. This is what the Democrats are doing. They're spending all this money, and it's heating up the economy way too fast. Blame them. They will use that against them in the midterm elections.
Well, and I'm thinking, we are right at this point next year. Everybody's going to be campaigning to save their job. Most of them, not everybody in the Senate, obviously, but everybody in the House. Moderate Democrats may have a tough time with this stuff back home just a year from now.
Yeah, and I would look in Arizona, obviously, you have Mark Kelly. That's going to be a competitive Senate race right there. The other thing to look at as you go across the board in the House of Representatives, and that's maybe why this isn't a done deal, you have kind of these polar opposites in the Democratic caucus. You have these very progressive liberal voices like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Cori Bush from Missouri, and even Pramila Jayapal, who is the chair of the Progressive Caucus, who she said she viewed the $3.5 trillion bill as a down payment. Even Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, said the bill wasn't quite as green as she would like to be, meaning she wanted more green energy incentives and components in this piece of legislation.
$3.5 trillion is a down payment?
That's what Jayapal said. And so when you talk to these moderates, they're asked to walk the plank here. Someone like Mark Kelly, and I look at other, moderates in the House of Representatives. Kurt Schrader in Oregon would be somebody I'll be keeping an eye on as well. Maybe Jared Golden in Maine. It depends what the actual bill looks like. Sometimes they can thread the needle and figure out a way to defend their vote if it's something that really helps them in their state or district. But when you get just these massive amounts of money, that's where they start to get very worried, especially if they're hearing, getting an earful from people back home concerned about inflation and price spikes.
Now, Chad, explain for our viewers and to me, these two things, infrastructure and the budget, were supposed to be on separate tracks, but now it seems they become linked together. Ocasio-Cortez says she won't buy into the infrastructure if they don't pass this budget of $3.5 trillion at least. Where are we on this? Are the votes there? You're all about the math. Do the Democrats have the votes to do these two things?
It's really unclear. And this is where Jen Psaki, the White House spokeswoman, she said, look at the roller coaster. The president is very acquainted with the roller coaster of legislating on Capitol Hill. That's kind of where they are right now. We don't know. The one thing we do know that in the House of Representatives, you can only lose 4 or 5 votes right there. The Senate, it's 50-50. This is why Democrats are using this special budget reconciliation process. It technically has nothing to do with the budget. It's just a parliamentary artifice, a gambit here, where you can do a bill or two a year and sidestep a filibuster so long as it is fiscal in nature. And so if you get all 50 Democrats together and then have Vice President Harris break the tie, you're in business. So it will come down to the math, but I tell you, they are threading a needle right now. And I will say this, at least in the House of Representatives, there is no better vote counter than Nancy Pelosi. Passing bills when you need 218 votes and she gets 219, she can get precisely the number of votes she needs for big bills.
Well, Chad Pergram, we're going to be watching it. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time from Washington. Still ahead on Newsmaker Saturday. Don't go anywhere. Next, the Valley author of this summer's thriller-packed novel, Falling. T.J. Newman, a former flight attendant, has crafted an incredible read that has hit the New York Times bestseller list in her very first novel. She just sold the movie rights for 7 figures. Her amazing story of perseverance. Coming up next on Newsmaker Saturday. Don't go anywhere. You won't want to miss this. Welcome back to Newsmaker Saturday. If you need a great book to read this summer, I think we've got one for you. It is called Falling. Written by a Valley woman, T.J. Newman, who came up with the thriller drawing from her 10 years as a flight attendant. And rarely do you see a highly produced trailer to promote a book. But we're going to give you a look at this trailer, and this will give you an idea of what you're in for.
You just boarded a flight to New York. There are 143 passengers on board. What you don't know is that 30 minutes before the flight, your pilot's family was kidnapped. For his family to live, everyone on your plane must die. The only way the family will survive is if the pilot follows his orders and crashes the plane. Enjoy your flight.
Okay, do we have your attention? More than just a riveting novel, this is a story about perseverance and dreaming big. Author T.J. Newman joins us now on Newsmaker Saturday. Congratulations, you are #2 on the New York Times bestseller list.
Hi.
Man.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard someone say it like that, and I'm still working on the believing part, John. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we're all collectively so proud of you. The movie rights have been bought by Universal. I think it's a 7-figure deal. Your head must be absolutely spinning.
Completely. My feet haven't touched the ground in a week. Publication day was, July 6th. And like I said, I haven't come down yet. This is all just the most surreal and incredible ride of my life.
Let's go back to the beginning. You were a flight attendant for 10 years. Do you remember the moment that this idea of this story crystallized in your mind?
I absolutely do. I was at work. I was working a red eye from Los Angeles to New York, which is also the flight in the book.
Flight 413.
Yes. And I was standing at the front of the cabin, looking out into the cabin at the passengers who are all asleep. It's dark, it's cold, it's quiet. And I have this thought that their lives and my life and the lives of all my crewmates, everybody's lives were in the hands of the pilots. And it was the first time that I thought of the flip side of that, which is that with that much power and responsibility, how vulnerable does that make the pilots? And I couldn't shake the thought. And so several days later, it had turned into a far more concrete scenario. And I said to the captain that I was flying with that day for that trip, hey, what would you do if, I don't know, your family was kidnapped and you...
I bet he loved this.
Yeah. Oh, wait till the second part. And I said, and you were told that if you didn't crash the plane, they would be killed. What would you do? And the look on his face terrified me because I knew that he didn't have an answer. And that was the moment that I knew I had a book to write.
You started scribbling ideas on cocktail napkins in the back of the plane, right? On the red eyes.
Yep. Red eyes were my favorite flights to work. And once everybody got settled down and went to sleep, I got to work on my book. And, I wasn't allowed to use a computer on those flights while at work. So I would write on anything that was there, the back of the passenger manifest or the back of a catering bill. Or sometimes, someone would make a comment and I would think, oh, I need to remember that. So I'd just grab a napkin and scribble down the note and put it in my apron and put it into the work later.
You know what this sounds a lot like to me is songwriting. And you talk to artists who are writing a song and sometimes they know really quickly, this is a hit. I feel it. This is a hit. Did you have that feeling?
Absolutely. And I mean, I've been a lifelong reader, a lifelong writer. It's always been a dream of mine to be a published author. This is what I've been working for my whole life, but I didn't have that idea. I didn't have that story that I knew I wouldn't be able to rest until I had written it and seen it as far as I could see it down the road.
Had you ever attempted a book before?
Yeah, I mean, I'd written lots of stories and I've got a whole pile of abandoned stories that, like I said, it was easy to abandon them when, you're busy and because I'm working full time and I have a full social life with friends and family. And also that, voice inside that says it's not good and this is silly and who would want to read this? It's easy to listen to that voice and just sort of give up. And
that's so true. That is so true. The self-doubt that creeps in, even if you think you've got something really good. And in your case, you had ventured out, I guess after high school or college, to attempt to make a career on Broadway or in New York, right?
That's exactly right. I studied musical theater in college, and after that, I did what you do with a degree in musical theater, and I moved to New York, and I tried to make it on Broadway. And since we're not having a conversation about the next show that I'm in, clearly that didn't work out very well.
So you got used to rejection or learned how to handle it?
I think learned how to handle it is the more accurate description. For me personally, I've never gotten used to it, and I've had a lot of rejection. And I'll tell you, you feel it. you feel all the rejection, which is why it was easy, like I said, to abandon all those stories, because rejection hurts, and I faced a lot of it.
This one, you didn't abandon this story. In fact, I think you had 41 no's before the 42nd yes. You were looking for literary agents to take this up. And it was a guy named Shane Salerno at the Story Factory who finally said yes. What did he see that the others didn't?
I don't know how he saw through the flaws that were in that manuscript to see what the potential was, what I knew the story was. He saw through all of it and helped me figure out how to tell this story the way it needed to be told. I don't know what was different about the 42nd submission as opposed to the rest of the 41 very clear and definitive no's that came before it, but I think it was just that I hadn't found my right fit yet. And you only need one yes. And Shane was my one yes.
You're in good company, TJ, because the Beatles were rejected many times before finally Parlophone signed them. So, I mean, somebody finally sees the light. In your case, did you have to keep rewriting the book, keep rewriting the manuscript to tighten it up and fix things? And who was guiding you through that?
I did. I wrote, by the time all was said and done with this, I wrote over 30 drafts of this book.
My God.
I didn't know what I was doing. I'd written my whole life, but I'd never written a story quite like this, with this much intercutting and plot-oriented and details. So it took a long time to really polish it and get it to the way that it needed to be. It was an intense revision and editing process, and I just kept going because I just knew the story was there if I could just figure out how to tell it properly. And I think I finally got it to that point.
I think you did, because you've got some of the biggest names in publishing who are just glowing things to say about your first effort.
It's wild. When I look at the blurbs on the book from James Patterson and Lee Child and Janet Ivanovich and Don Winslow, and it just... that's more of, my head spinning and feet not touching the ground. It's just, these are the literary giants that I've looked up to my whole life, and to have them be so supportive of this and to enjoy this story it means the world.
It's life-changing for you. And I think for the reader, you just keep hearing from readers who can't put the thing down. It's a great summer read. Okay, so without giving away the story, and this is a dance you've got to do when you're promoting the book, how would you describe kind of what this story is? Sure.
The elevator pitch, if you will, is that this is a story of Flight 416, a nonstop flight from Los Angeles to New York. And what the passengers on board this flight don't know is that just before they took off, the family of their pilot was kidnapped. And he has now been told that he can either crash the plane or his family will die. And therefore, the story then follows the valiant efforts of the passengers and the crew in the air, along with the FBI and the family on the ground in their attempts to do the impossible.
Do you worry at all that you may be giving somebody a crazy idea out there? Because I don't think anybody had ever contemplated the vulnerability of the pilot like that.
I think I'm a flight attendant with an overactive imagination, and I think I have complete trust and faith in the people whose jobs it is to make sure that our airspace is safe, and I'm sure they've thought further along down the line than I have.
How much did 9/11 and that whole situation color this book?
I think 9/11, being a member of aviation for a decade, and my mom was a flight attendant and my sister was a flight attendant as well, aviation is a presence and a shadow that will always be there in every aspect of aviation. And so I think when I was writing this story, just as working a trip it's impossible to separate the two. It's just it's a presence that will always be there.
For somebody who is out there, who has a dream and is afraid, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, and I would hope they would believe this so sincerely, is that if I can do this, you can do this. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have an in. I don't have a background in writing. I had no idea what I was doing. I literally researched every step along the way and just figured it out step by step as I went. And when I got to the point that I was looking for an agent, that when I wanted to get this published, I literally bought a book called The Essential Guide to Getting Your Book Published, and I read it and I followed the directions. I am nothing more than a person who had a big dream and was willing to do the work. And I really hope that people listening to this story, if they have a dream, I hope they keep moving towards it, because if you work hard, it can happen.
Yeah, it can, and it is happening to you. Are you used to this yet, what's happening? Or I think of J.K. Rowling and the whole Harry Potter thing, which just blew up for her, changed her life. You know, you're kind of in the middle of something like that right now.
Yeah, am I used to it? No. It's still just so, I mean, when you dream about something for so long and then it becomes a reality, it's hard to realize that you're not still in that dreaming state, especially when there was so much rejection. And I got so used to accepting deeply the rejection that to accept the successes, it's taken me a minute to unlearn that habit that I had going all the way back to college and my time in New York, of just knowing that it was going to be hard and there was going to be painful rejection. So it's incredible, and I'm so happy to be in this moment, but it doesn't feel fully real yet.
You did keep this a secret from almost everyone, right? Because you didn't want them to say, "You're nuts. What are you doing? Why are you wasting your time?" You just kept it from them.
Exactly. I kept it from everyone. I didn't even tell my family I was writing this until I was like many, many, many months into the process, because I'd gotten burned and I felt like I had put myself out there creatively and gotten burned, and I didn't want to do it again. I was embarrassed. And like I said, I wasn't confident in what I was doing. So this was a way for me to be artistic and creative as a creative person. That's a requirement for my existence. So it was a way to do that felt safe and felt like it was introverted and something that I could do just for me. And so nobody knew. And when the book deal even went public, when it became this thing that I had this 2-book deal, I was getting texts and phone calls from like very close friends and family that were saying, like, "Oh my gosh, congratulations. This is so incredible. We're so happy for you. You wrote a book?"
I love it. I love it. Are you working on the second book right now?
I am. I've taken a couple weeks off to bring this book to publication, which
Right.
has been a nonstop whirlwind of activity. So I've taken a break for a couple weeks to do this, but then I'm right back in, and I'm having a blast figuring out that creative process too.
We want people to, people are going to read the book. Obviously, New York Times bestseller, that puts you on the map. The movie, how can you at least tell us how far along the movie with Universal is?
I wish I could, but there'd be a knock on my door. I've been sworn to secrecy for all of it. Just
Wow.
the fact that there was a movie deal and that there's the chance that it could be on the screen is just, again, none of this feels real. It's all, I just wanted to see if I could get a book published. Things like New York Times bestseller and movie deal like that never even entered the equation. I just wanted to share this story with the world, and it's surpassed everything I ever hoped.
TJ, just quickly, you grew up where in the Valley?
Born and raised in Mesa, Arizona. I went to Dobson. Yep, I went to Dobson High School. And yeah, I now live downtown Phoenix. So proud Valley native.
We are so proud of you, and best of luck. We'll put the book up again so people can see it. Falling is getting just rave reviews, and the best of luck to you. It's just a great story, and I really am thrilled that you came on the program.
It was my absolute pleasure. Like I said, I'm a native, I'm a local Valley girl, so this is really a treat. I've watched you my whole life growing up, so this is pretty cool.
Well, that is very nice of you to say. TJ Newman, former flight attendant, now best-selling author. Get used to it. TJ, thank you. We'll see you soon. Let's do this again.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're back in a minute on Newsmaker Saturday. Thanks again for being with us on Newsmaker Saturday. People ask all the time, how do I find a past episode, or even if they want to see a current episode that they missed? Fox10phoenix.com/newsmaker. It's right there, past shows. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.